Thank you. I am so excited to be here because the idea of decentralized science, agents, and acceleration is a dream I've been talking about for years, some people for decades. For me, it's been years. Since I was getting into the concept of decentralized science a couple years ago, I had this beautiful vision that we can combine APIs, agents, the ability of people digitized to create better results, better science, better innovations for society. I come from CerebrumDAO. We are a recent bio DAO. I think we're like literally 1 year old, I think in 2 weeks when we launched our token. So our focus is really about brains helping brains, connected community. We're really focused on neuroscience, tackling one of the biggest problems we face as society, which is neurodegeneration, reducing it, affecting it, hopefully solving it. Neurodegeneration is a big challenge that is really throughout societies and throughout the world. It can be related to many different factors. There's healthy aging, there's natural aging of the brain, as we call it. But reality, we have so many different factors, traumas, and influences that are affecting our brain, whether the system or the function. And there are some things that we try to address, like neurodegeneration, where we can bring interventions earlier on in the process to reduce this giant burden, which is going to be coming to various parts of our world. And the brain is an incredibly complex organ, complex part of ourselves, right? It's created when we're born. As we age, everything is essentially an interface and a stimuli to our brains. Traumas which occur in childhood or other times throughout the life can perpetuate in the decrease in cognitive function or just making it more difficult to lead the lives we want to live. And because of that, many of us are looking for solutions, and we're really trying to solve the problem of putting the right resources and the right money and the right funding in the right science at the right time. I think that's one of the classic problems, one of the classic things that DAOs are trying to achieve, that we do science more efficiently to get more innovations and interventions into the hands, in this case, into the brains of people worldwide. This is difficult because we have to first understand the brain before we can really understand exactly how to treat the brain or to improve it. Anyone in the audience, either in YouTube land or out here in reality, do you have a sense, a feeling for how your brain has changed from the time you were born, through adolescence, through midlife, to where you are right now? Do you have a sense for how your weight has been changing from that time? There are some, it's really interesting, there are some parts of ourselves that we can measure super easily. I can step on a scale every day. I can see that my weight was going up 88, 89 kilograms, and it comes down a little bit. I can track the history, that evolution of my body. I can't really do the same thing for my brain. I had cancer a couple of years ago. When I was doing chemotherapy, my cognition would decrease from Monday until Wednesday. As I was doing chemotherapy, I could predict exactly when I would stop being functional as a person. But I didn't have a way to measure that. So this is one of the things that we're looking to do as a DAO, understand how brain structure function is changing, how it can be measured, and then how we can intervene. So we're doing this in a few different ways. One, understanding lifestyle factors, because there are many ways that we live our lives that can then affect how our brains are evolving over time, right? Smoking, alcohol, drugs, exercise, water. These can all have different effects, pluses and minuses, depending on which ones they are at which point in time. And then we want to help empower people through these interventions, whether it's pharma interventions where we're actually developing drugs that we can bring to market, or these are products which we can develop and develop an ecosystem around which can help with the lifestyle interventions. So some of the core activities, and we're talking really about what are the core agents that can be developed to facilitate the acceleration of science with DAOs like CerebrumDAO. So some of our core activities are developing a product ecosystem, which is developing non-medical interventions that can be either developed through us in the DAO, through our understanding of what's happening with the brain, or it can be done through bringing in partners into this ecosystem, right? Research funding, translating research into intellectual property, licensing it, building that into the recurring value of the DAO is another big topic. We do development and science projects in the DAO, so we raise funding. We work with clinical or contact research organizations to do the research, whether it's looking at assay developments, trying to develop targets, or doing human clinical trials. We do spin-off companies. We just did a Fission Bio as one of our projects, is now going out into the world to create new solutions for mitochondrial dysfunction. And long-term, I see one of our big values is going to be creating sources to collect brain data so that we can start to build towards things like foundational models for brain health, which I think will be able to interact with other foundational models that are out there in the world, whether it's genetics, RNA, or other systems. So when I think about like the core, what can we really accelerate? Number one, it goes back to the question of the knowledge graph, which we talked about earlier in the morning. So this is one of the key needs that I think all the DAOs have. How can we conceptualize the knowledge that we have? Because every day our translational and neuroscience team is doing research. They're looking for new deal opportunities. They're looking and asking the question, what can we do with the funding that we have to make the most impact on neurodegeneration that is not currently being addressed by other funding bodies, by the NIH or Horizon Europe or other organizations? So one, we always have the desire, the dream that we have a knowledge graph which we can have a snapshot of where brain health is right now, where are the solution pathways that we need to capitalize on, where we can put our funding and resources into, which will then translate into fulfilling our mission vision of getting rid of neurodegeneration. Practically, that means going then to deal sourcing. Again, if you've been working in sourcing deals or in a VC environment, it's a lot of work to also go out and find the people, the researchers that are going to have the biggest impact to fulfill the mission that you have. And then the question is, okay, we funded deals, how effective are they? What does this actual portfolio look like? Now, these are a lot of relatively basic but extremely useful activities that can be done and I think can be automatized so that we can accelerate a lot of the day-to-day activities that we have, because we want to get to the core of doing the best science at the right point in time. And I believe that the agent infrastructure, starting from the knowledge graph to experimental design to management of the deals, will help us have that snapshot and acceleration potential. And then the other part is setting up research studies, whether it's decentralized trials, doing trial planning, identifying the best people to include in trials, in trial inclusion criteria. Those are also some topics I know other companies and DAOs are working on, like WellShare. So I see a lot of potential for interfacing and integrating with them. When I talk about creating like a growing repository of brain health, this will first be happening through one of our product partnerships. We are partnered with a company called 21 Impact Labs. They develop an app called Xponetic. Xponetic assists people with making the right decisions for their brain, so addressing the lifestyle factors. We'll also have a cognitive assessment to assess cognitive brain health or change over time. And what we want to do is start bringing out this application, starting the collection of data, which can then be used together with biomarkers and interventions to understand what's the efficacy of the different lifestyle factors for people as a whole, so the generalized population, and also for individuals. And I believe the outcome of that will naturally be a brain health agent or brain health personalization engine, which is assisting people in knowing what interventions to take and how to really manage the change in their brain over time. Going back to the analogy of the scale and measuring your weight, if I measure my weight, I know what the trend is. I don't know what my trend in neurodegeneration is. So we really are trying to find ways to have a solution for that. Now, going into a lot of the day-to-day activities, we have a deal flow process. Very similar to other DAOs. A lot of DAOs have been building all their processes based on what VitaDAO was doing originally, or looking to some of the other DAOs like AthenaDAO, using examples, seeing what worked for one DAO, and then applying it to our use cases. And this is also where a lot of the day-to-day work goes into. Looking at different deals, identifying what researchers to work with, listening to these researchers, having multiple meetings, which can be recorded. We can already start to create large data sets for the deals that we're evaluating at a certain point in time. We can then historically look at what deals we funded and why. So I believe we can create a nice set of training data for agents to understand how do we go from the mission vision, we want to solve neurodegeneration, to the science that we're funding, to the outcome and the success of those projects. So facilitating just the very simple process of sourcing, whenever you look at agent design, one of the first examples I always see is, hey, we're going to create a marketing agent which is going to go out and it's going to source new clients, and then we'll create emails to market to them directly so we can speed up the process for marketing or customer development. And it's very similar to the DAO. There's a lot of templates that I've seen and have also started to experiment with Flowise and other agent systems to map out searching for new opportunities. I think one of the problems that we have, it really also goes to the exactness, the specificity of current agents or large language models. One time I went to, it was like a month ago, I went to an organoids conference in Basel, and I started chatting with one of the agents online on Twitter to start talking about, hey, this is what I've learned about organoids today. How are we going to accelerate this? How can we help solve neurodegeneration in the future? And it gave some good ideas, but it was very generic. It missed a lot of the specificity. That's where, again, going back to the knowledge graph and the concrete knowledge base, like our understanding of neurodegeneration at this point in time, that we know what works, we validated it, and it's not just generic information coming from ChatGPT, although it gets better and better every day with a lot of the example models we have out there. That's one of the things I'd really love to accelerate with the bioagents and the core DAO agent challenges. Going back now to some of our projects, so you see how it's working. We funded a couple of IPT projects, so we fractionalized the intellectual property of a few core projects that are helping to fulfill our mission vision. One was Neuropercepta. This was a project which is looking at a supplement to help disentangle tau proteins that have accumulated in the brain. We look at mitochondrial dysfunction with Vision Bio, which is spun off as a company. And most recently, Paul alluded to this earlier today, looking at protein stability and reducing aggregates with the Transfidelity project. So we've done a good job, I think, over the past year of sourcing and translating these projects into fundable projects which we're now executing on the science on. But it also took, a year, and there was a lot of stuff in between, like reviewing the deals, understanding what was the history of Percepta, going through like 20 patents of Percepta, understanding what were the actual claims included in that intellectual property, which would be valuable to then bring into a product, funding it, and then saying, okay, we're going to do a clinical trial. We look for a clinical trial organization. We start to set up our investigational report. What are the endpoints? Okay, we'll use the cognitive assessment from MoCA. Okay, well, we've got it. It's running. It's like kicking off in Q2 of this year. But it also took a lot of time to do. And so we're also thinking, how do we accelerate those things? So understanding the problem, understanding the endpoints, understanding how we're going to prove whether or not this solution is working or not within the whole context of neurodegeneration. Those are some of the things that I'd love to see put into agents, which would really accelerate our research process. Another big thing is going back to the senior review process. I'll just jump back quickly to deal flow. Once we've qualified that a deal works, that we think is going to be a great deal to fund, we still have to do final reviews to really look really in-depthly into the science. And that senior review process also takes time, it takes money. I don't think we want to fully replace the senior review process, but we really want to accelerate it and know that we can validate it with tools that are going to take the science that's been validated, is giving answers where we can go beyond just the opinions that we have of our deal flow members, but having a more measurable way to say, yeah, this project, this looks good at this point in time. If we fund it, we can expect a result in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. That's kind of a big challenge to get over. I don't know if that can be solved with agents at this point in time, but I think we can start to form the foundation for creating agents that are exact enough to make those predictions. And again, it all goes back to having a solid knowledge graph which understands where we are in neurodegeneration and where we can be going. And then that brings us, so I've said, what are our core activities? Now, how are we getting it done? Because this is really where a lot of the challenges come up, right? Person-to-person communication, working in between different working groups on a common goal to get to the point where we've translated the idea into the funding, into the results. So at Cerebrum, we have a translational neuroscience team. We've got a product working group. There's community growth. And this is actually one of our big challenges right now. We've been focused so much on doing the science, doing clinical research, getting everything ready, doing the IPTs. We don't have always time to say, hey, world, look at us. This is what we just did. We're bringing this new solution to market, or we're bringing this new research project to the next phase. Isn't that amazing? Right? Because once you've been going through the deal flow process, you don't have time to write a tweet or to have an AMA space, right? All that stuff is taking up time. So we'd love to have better ways to translate our activities into forms that can be shown and communicated to the outside world. I think that's also a common with many different DAOs. I know many DAOs are doing it better than us. Valley DAO has always amazing stuff on Twitter. I'm always very envious of them. Vita DAO always looks really good as well. And we want to share our story in a more efficient way, just as we're doing science in a more efficient way. And I see that also as a very approachable, easy to do, I don't want to say easy. It's a goal that can be achieved, right? To translate the activities of the DAO, whether it's pulling on what's happening in Discord, always being obviously cognizant of data protection and not wanting to share things that are protected under NDA. But thinking of ways that we can have more of a data flow from our activities to the outside world. That would really help us a lot in just scaling the impact that we're having. Also then the governance and operations part of the DAO, which I think also translates across many organizations. Just the point of going from the deal sourcing process to then writing up the governance proposal, it's theoretically not a lot of time, but if you can save a couple hours here and there and save that time, which would be the focus of 2 or 3 different people over a week or 2 weeks, that's a big win, right? We've written a bunch of governance actions already. There's a training set for the form of what they look like. If we have the data from the review meetings of the deal flow process, which has been transcribed into a corpus, which can then be pulled and then put into the funding application, and we can do it faster, then we can focus more on our core of finding new deals and getting the right science at the right point in time. So we've been thinking about a lot of this stuff over the past couple of years, or last 2 years. And the whole team dynamics part is also, I think, a really interesting challenge for DAOs in particular, because they're decentralized, they're connected organizations. We can have a mission vision, but we have to also communicate it to ourselves, to our community. This can be done through things like writing standard operating procedures. Again, something very cool, very valuable, which takes time. And if we could just have a recording from explaining what we're doing in a deal flow process, for example, and we had a standard operating procedure automatically created for us, that would be amazing. And that would help with communication with new people coming into the DAO who share our vision for solving neurodegeneration. And of course, that's common to every organization. Anyone who's worked in a startup, and there's been new hires, and there's been old hires, who need to be onboarded to the culture of the DAO, who need to be onboarded to understanding where we are in our roadmap right now. What are we doing this week? What are we doing next week? These are things which take a lot of operational time to organize, and it's our job. But if we can make it easier, of course, this would be amazing. And I think that would really help to go from that stage of forming, storming, like skipping more to the norming and performing stage of team development. And that will be super valuable for any DAO which is launching and then growing. And I know there's a lot of new DAOs coming out every quarter now from Bio. It's very active, very awesome, really accelerating. And we put together our first concepts for core agents that we thought would be super valuable. The researcher, the deal flow evaluation, IPT projects. This is an agent which is really taking the corpus from a specific project like Fission Bio or Percepta, and then it can communicate that project on the project webpage. So that it's a lot easier for people like token holders or prospective token holders to dive into the project and understand what it's about, commit to it, and help to support it. Long-term things like product sourcing will also be valuable. And I think the cool thing is that when you have the deal evaluation or deal sourcing agent, changing it for product is very easy or very straightforward. Something, what are the foundations it can build and then build upon to accelerate other agent development. The brain health agent is one of the long-term goals that we have, and it requires that we first launch Exponetic, build the first brain health database, build the interventions, and then that data can go in and help with brain health personalization agents. With our personal roadmap within Cerebrum, we did prototyping and more requirements gathering and understanding over the past half year. Been working with some frameworks like Flowise to do prototypes, like we were releasing, doing first, let's say, MVP prototypes for things like IPT agent, for Percepta. And then when I heard that the Bio Hackathon was happening, I thought this is amazing. We can sync up, we can take a lot of these agent requirements and architectures and then provide them as templates that you can see exactly how this would facilitate our use cases. We also have like old concepts from the past, full architecture diagrams where we talk about what's the DAO, what are the key things that we can accelerate, whether it's focus, and even back then, a year ago, knowledge graph was basically the biggest thing. Combine it with the language model, combine it with our own knowledge base inside the DAO. And I mean, as far as agent design goes, I feel like this is, V1 before you get into like really, really high level stuff that we've also been talking about today. Looking for the core values that we can deliver in a short period of time with really robust results. And I think the basic RAG pipeline for DAOs make it easy to set up. Just take the literature review that we've already been doing, don't redo more work, but take all the knowledge you already have and make it available to the agent system would already accelerate, I think, quite a bit of the use cases. In the agent design process, or the research process we've been doing, I oftentimes start with user flow. So very practically, what's the user flow for the deal flow process? What's the user flow for a researcher? I set up templates in Mural, which can also be accessible and shareable if people want to steal them or, take them over. And from this, we go from user flow to product or agent requirements. And then the question is, okay, if we're using the ELIZA framework, what's the functionality we already have? Is this a requirement for a new plugin? And I want to be able to make it easy to have that conversation with all the developers so you can really understand our problems and really how to implement. And then for some of the projects, we already have basic architecture diagrams where it says, we need this corpus of patents. We need this corpus of research articles. We imagine we'll use the OpenAI API and we'll have a pinecone database. Kind of like the classic RAG architecture. And for the specific problem needs, we've listed out everything for the initial desires. For the neuroscience researcher, we develop goals, the identity. We haven't gone in and done like prompt engineering, for example, but we want to have the initial requirements so that the goal of the agent is to mine the literature that's currently out there in the wild, and then look at things that can be brought into a database and then approved by our human researchers, so that we also have that checks and balance, that human in the loop that I think we also have been talking about this morning. And then the tool input that we see, or in this case, subagents, things like web scraper, evaluating the papers or research, generating reports. A lot of this stuff I think can also be done on some of the more open-ended or accessible systems out there, like OpenAI or Google Deep Research, where we're looking at ways that we can customize it, really for our needs. The knowledge graph curation is probably one of the most exciting things for me personally, thinking about this hackathon, because just being able to curate and create these knowledge graphs, it gives like that snapshot, that tangible thing that we then have inside the DAO, which is a very clear output of the translational neural research work. Because it's very difficult, even with a deal flow process, you might be talking to researchers for a long time, and you might not realize all the information that you've collected during that process. It's difficult to have it in one place, but I think the knowledge graph is really the logical way to make that happen. We talked a bit about the senior review process. This really requires in-depth knowledge about the specific project that's being reviewed, which would probably also require its own new research agent to run, new knowledge graph to be created and validated, and having the human in the loop to validate the output of that. Again, we don't want to completely replace the existing senior researchers, but we want to have a more level understanding for the review process, the inputs, and the output. So for a lot of these, we also would have available data, like the criteria that we have for deals that we currently use that could be taken over as the agent personality or essential prompt engineering. I think we can also make available some of the past transcripts for some of the meetings or deal flow meetings, where we can use that as training data so the agent can understand what question to ask at what point in time, right? That's one of the essential things I hope we can get to, the mind of the senior reviewer, how can it be translated into an agent system? It'd be really amazing. Deal flow, we talked about before, automating this, I think it's essential. It's relatively straightforward if we want to have a hockey stick, exponential growth of DAO research and funding. Because we've seen this already a couple of years ago. We can create a knowledge graph, we can create a process. It takes human time to scale. And that's basically a limitation of us as humans. And that's why we have agents, so we can make it all happen faster. Product sourcing, again, our mission is to look at regulated interventions as well as non-regulated, so product interventions. For this, it's really more akin to understanding what's out there in the market, connecting with groups that we want to bring into our product marketplace so that we can have a collection of revenue-generating products which are all within the brain health journey sphere so that they're validated scientifically. We understand what their purpose is and what their efficacy is, and that can then be communicated to users and customers of the DAO. And then long term, the drug development agent, which is slightly mislabeled here, searching for and evaluating different drug targets. Doing this on a wide scale is also something which touches on, I think, many of the topics we've already talked about. Repurposing drugs, repurposing research results to understand, can we create more effective drugs? Can we repurpose drugs that have been tested for efficacy already or been tested for safety already, but they are now being repurposed for a different efficacy or a different purpose? Doing that at scale is something that would be amazing for an agent to be able to do. which of course can take together literature research, foundational genetic models, most likely, in silico screening processes, right? It's a very advanced agent. I think a lot of people are working on it, but it would also be super cool to make some more advancement in that field. I am very happy to talk about this at length for anyone wanting to listen or co-develop. I'll be accessible on the Discord. My name is Melnykowycz. Also contact me via email, and hope we can help to contribute to our mission vision of brains helping brains and solving neurodegeneration. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, Mark. So we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. Does anyone have anything they want to ask? All right.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the very insightful structure talk about the DAO and how it works. I think it was very clear and also for some people probably familiar, especially like the deal flow process. I'm curious, how does it work? Like, is there a form on the website? Where does the data go? How does it get evaluated? Like, is it a already solved, frictionless experience? Or I just wonder, what tooling do you use? Do you use Airtable? Do you use...
Yeah,
like,
so we started, like, we have a form. I don't know how often it's used right now, because this is the other thing. We're also trying to source from different areas. And we're also redoing our website so it's going to be more accessible so people understand what our funding process is and how to apply to us. We did have a form, and then it would basically go at that time to Asana, so it would come into a task, which could then go directly into the evaluation process. There's also a lot of person-to-person, identifying a researcher, reaching out to them. They might contact us, not through the form, just through person-to-person. We set up a first meeting, and then set up another meeting. So I think there's a hybrid process. It kind of depends on who's contacting, and there's definitely different ways to streamline it. And yeah.
Because I think the potential for the agent is, like right now we have 10, 15 DAOs, like if they have their own processes, they kind of all need their own agent. So in like a perfect world, there would be some common ground, and then you could develop agents that other DAOs could reuse then, or like slightly modify. But I think, yeah, from what I heard from your talk, it seems like very structured, but maybe I will ask you later about some more details. Would love to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, it has a structure. I wouldn't say it's very structured. And I think that's also one cool opportunity is like co-funding between DAOs for common areas. I mean, you heard about this with the Trans Fidelity Project. I think someone totally correct me if I say something wrong, but it was originally from VitaDAO, and then we came in because it was also going more towards the brain, and then we sort of started to take the lead on it. So there was a type of co-funding existing, but it wasn't really assessed that way from the get-go. So this idea of having co-projects from the beginning, because then you're also able to pull more resources into that project, if it makes sense, could also be a nice agent architecture goal.